So we're on, what is it? Chavav, no, Chafayim base. So we had the beginning of the paragraph, it says, Arba, Nedarim Mitir Chachamim, Nidrei Zruzin, Nidrei Havai. Up to the third one, Nidrei Shkagos, then there's going to be Nidrei Onsen. So this is Nidrei Shkagos. And the Mishnah said before that for some of the Nedarim is mutter, and the Gemara said before means you only have to have Hataras Nedarim. It's mutter even without Hataras Nedarim. And so far we had about Zruzin, which meant he's coming to pressure somebody, but negotiations, we know he doesn't mean it. We pass on like a Balazar, that even by neighborly pressuring is also Zruzin, and also it does not need a Hataras Nedarim. The Nidrei Havai was yesterday's Gemara about exaggerations, that's the way people speak, and we know that he didn't mean it literally. And here's the third, Nidrei Shkagos, which means a mistake. What does that mean? So it gives a few examples of mistakes. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to give 4 examples of mistakes. The first one is, he made a neder, I'm mastering something, whatever, a loaf of bread, if I ate or if I drank. He wants to say, he wants to impress people that I didn't eat or drink. So he says, if I ate or drank, then this loaf of bread is asur. And he really meant at the time that he did not eat or drink. He thought that he didn't eat or drink. So he said, if I ate or drank, then this thing should be asur on me. And then this kashachal b'shasa, he really did eat and drink. He made a mistake. When he made the neder, he was under the false impression. He thought that he didn't eat. And that's why he made the neder. But really he did. That's a mistake. And it doesn't take effect. It means he didn't mean it. He really meant, he didn't mean to ask it because he thought for sure that the Tanai, the condition, every neder has a condition, not every neder, this neder has a condition. I'm asking the bread if. But the Tanai that he made was a mistake. He thought that the condition was not fulfilled, and really it was fulfilled. So that's the first case of a mistake, and the neder doesn't take effect. It doesn't have to become us in the neder that he said. Another case of a mistake is bigger chiddush maybe shani ochel v'shani shosei, not in the past but in the future. If I'm going to eat or I'm going to drink, this thing should be asur. And then by mistake he ate and drank. He did eat and drink. So even though at the time that he forgot, when he ate and drank, he didn't realize that by eating now he's fulfilling the condition and it's going to activate the neder. He's going to become asur. He didn't realize. So he would have thought, okay, but you know, very nice, you forgot, but you might say you ate and drank. So no, since the fulfillment of the neder was by mistake, also doesn't take effect, and it doesn't become asur. Those are the first 2 cases, which are pretty chiddush, that even though he made it tonight, the Tanai was fulfilled. Since the Tanai, either in the past, was mistakenly fulfilled, he didn't really realize that it was fulfilled, and he didn't really mean to take on the neder, or in the future, he didn't mean that it should be activated. He mistakenly activated it, so also doesn't become activated. Just to point out that this is not the subject of shvur. Shvur means when a person swears under the false impression. The Gemara is going to talk about that, and that's the question: is it a false oath? He made an oath under false impression. He thought something and he swore about it, and really it was a mistake. That's going to be a chiddush that the Gemara is going to talk about, that he swore falsely. Here it's not a question of something falsely. Here the question is, did he activate the neder or not? Does it get activated? And the Gemara said, and the Mishnah says, these 2 cases, the neder doesn't get activated, either because he didn't think that he's activating it when he made the Tanai, he thought that it didn't happen, whatever he said about the past, or in the future, when he activated it, he didn't realize that he's activating it. He forgot that he's not supposed to eat and drink. If he does, it's gonna. So these 2 cases don't activate the neder. Another case of a neder is called the shkaga. Omar Kohen Mishin honestly, Shagon Baskisi, Sheikh says Beni, 2 cases that he asked his wife benefiting from him because he was under the impression that she stole something from him, or that she hit their son and he was upset about it, that he shouldn't have hit the son. But he said, the reason why I'm answering you is because of this thing. But then it came out that never happened. The whole thing was not true. No, the shalom he got to know the shalom, but she didn't hit the son, she didn't steal. So he made the neder under a false impression. He thought, because he didn't make it tonight. He didn't. If he would have said beferish, I'm answering you if you hit if you stole. So then surely if she didn't steal, so that's not a chiddush. The chiddush is that he didn't say it tonight. He said, I'm answering you because I know that you stole. Then it came out she didn't steal. So that's also called the neder shkaga. It's not the case, not the same case as the first 2 cases where it was on a tanai and it was activated by mistake. Here he made it tonight under the impression of a mistake, and that's also considered a neder shkaga. Also it's not asur. So he asked her or asked something under a false impression, also it doesn't get activated, and it's not awesome. Another case, a fourth case. So I made a stop over here for 2 dots, and also the next Mishnah is going to be like a new Mishnah. V'hoyu. Some even take out the vav. The vav in the next letter, v'hoyu. If you read it the way it says it, then I shouldn't have made a stop. I should have read but it's nicer in some of the girsa to take out the vav, and it's a new case. So we'll stop here. And this is the fourth case in the Mishnah. He saw people eating figs. Figs. He had a fig tree, and he saw people picking at his fig tree. And he said, "What is this?" So in order to stop them, he said that they're konam. That's a korban. That what does it mean? That they have kedusha, not kedusha. They become also like a korban. And now it isn't only stealing. Stealing, they were willing to steal. For some reason, they had no problem stealing. But if it's also beneder, they're not gonna. So he made it a konam. He made them maser on them by saying that this fruit belongs to me and I'm mastering it on you. He has the right to do that. And that's how he stopped him from eating it. But he didn't realize that his father and brother were there. They were really his father and brother. So he didn't mean that. So since even though he made the Nedarim, he asked them because he thought that they were strangers. When he found out that they weren't strangers, they were relatives, he didn't mean to ask them. So then they don't become Muslim. So for examples, either if I ate, or if I'm going to eat, or because of a certain impression that he thought that a certain thing had happened and it hadn't happened, or he thought that there were certain people and they weren't really those people. So all these cases are called Nidrei Shkogos and they don't take effect. As far as the Nidrei Shkogos, we're pretty much finished. That's the end of the sugya, end of the day, end of the whole Mishnah, and not too much. And the Gemara's not going to talk about it. That's it. That's the din of Nidrei Shkogos. That if you made a neder under a false impression, it doesn't take effect. The rest of the Mishnah now is a new din, which is going to be the main subject of the Gemara. If you take out the vav, it makes it a little bit easier reading. This is the last case about the figs, that he saw people picking at the figs. They're picking his figs, and he said, "What's this?" And then it came out that it was a father and a brother, his relatives, that he didn't mean to ask him. So that's good. If it was only his father and his brother, so that's the case. The Nidrei Shkogos doesn't take effect. And the mutter. What if there were people besides the father and the brother? And he would have meant to answer it on the other people. Does the father and the brother not? That's the question. There were other people also. And it does not take effect on the father and the brother. But there are other people also. So does everything become mutter? That the brother and the father are mutter because he didn't mean them. But the rest of the people, those people that are with them are also because over there he did mean it. He said, everybody's mutter. Since part of the neder doesn't take effect, the rest of the neder also doesn't take effect, which the Gemara is going to call soon. Neder Shehuta Kulo, and that's the same idea here. That it's mutter, not because of Torah is Nedarim. Yes, mutter because he never meant that. It was Nidrei Shkogos. Since some of the neder was a Nidrei Shkogos and it didn't take effect, so too the rest of the neder also doesn't take effect. So nobody does it. It does put it over here. L'chara, it's no shaykhis to this Mishnah. This was an example of a neder which doesn't take effect, and the Mishnah threw in a case. What about if part of it was a shkoga, the rest of it was not? Does that part still remain or not? And that seems to be a general machlokes, nothing to do with our particular case. We just slapped it onto our Mishnah because we have a case over here of a neder which is not taking effect. But the Chori could have taken it another nedarim also. And the Gemara is going to talk about other cases about a Torah nedarim that he had a neder, then he was matir part of it, and does the whole neder go off or not? So very interesting that the Mishnah makes a case over here which doesn't have to do dafka with our case. It's just one example of a case where the neder doesn't take effect. And it could have slapped on this halacha about neder shuta miksas huta kulo and any kind of a neder which doesn't take effect. But this is where it puts it, and the sugya of the Gemara is going to be on our.
How do you pass it? Like that if you have to do the whole thing also.
Right, that's what it says. Like we say, not like Bishamai. But the Gemara is going to still talk more details about it. It's not absolutely one blanket law, but that's what it says in the Mishnah. That is a case that part of the neder doesn't take effect. So Basil says the whole thing doesn't take effect. Okay, so what do we have? 2 halachas in our Mishnah. One is Nidrei Shkogos and 4 examples of Nidrei Shkogos. He didn't mean it. He didn't mean to activate it. He didn't mean it under that circumstance. And another sugi comes down as a side subject about Neder Shehuta Miksasa. The part of it didn't take effect. Does the rest of it take effect or not? The Gemara starts. Tana, Kishem Shenidrei Shkogos Mutar and Kach Shavuos Shkogos Mutar. Before we get into the main subject that we'll talk about today, about Shavuos Shkogos, the Mishnah talks about Nedarim. How about Shavuos? We know that Shavuos, an oath, is more severe. We had before a subject. Sometimes we saw that something is more chama by shvua. It was 2 gersos in the Gemara yesterday about Nidri Havai, about how about Shavuos Havai, and our Gemara it said that it's Aser. Is that true? What did we say yesterday? Yesterday's Gemara. Nidri Havai Mutan, Shavuos Havai Asurin. Our Gemara's guess was that Shavuos more chomer as far as Havai. But here the Gemara is going to say that by Shgagos, that Shavuos Shgag is also not considered an Aveira. Someone made a Shavuah, Mamish made an oath because he had the wrong impression. He thought something. He swears something. But then he swore that because he thought something.
Wrong information.
Wrong information. So it's not considered a Shavuah. And that's the Gemara. Tanya Kishem Jenidre Shkogos Mutor Kach Shavuah Shkogos Mutoros, that a Shavuah that he made by mistake is not a Shavuah. Echidami Shavuah Shkogos, what's the case? And here gives one example of Rav Kana, Rav Asi, they made a Shavuah, and one of them was a lie, but he didn't think it was a lie. He go to Rav Kana, Rav Asi, Hadei Nam Mashvuah Sadach Yamarav, Vadei Nam Mashvuah Sadach Yamarav. They're both of them were Talmidim of Rav Kana and Rav Asi, and Rav had said something, and the Talmidim were arguing over what Rav said. The opposite, one says Rav said mutter, one said Rav said Asa, one said I swear that Rav said mutter. The other said I swear that Rav said Asa. So one of them lied. It came out at the end that Rav said one of the two ways, and one of them said a shvuah sheker, and what's the din? The cholchad b'chad adaita the nafshei shapik mishtap. He thought he was saying the truth. If you think he's saying the truth, then it's not considered a shvuah sheker. Of course, you can't plan anything because if you know, you know. So there's no way to go around. But if a person is making a shvuah because he thinks that his information is right, so it's not considered a false shvuah. The Gemara doesn't say it over here, but Rishonim bring down that this Gemara, it says ha'adam b'shvuah. Yes, whatever. Ha'adam b'shvuah. Ha'adam b'shvuah. The Gemara says a man with the shvuah. That means he has to be a man. Yeah, and man means a seichel. He has to have a seichel on him when he talks. If he's under the wrong impression, like the person is not there. He made a shvuah, but the person was missing because he thought the wrong information. So that's the halacha. Just like Nidre Shgagos doesn't take effect, Shvuah Shgagos is not considered an Aveira. It doesn't have to do over here about answering something. Nothing's activated. It's just saying, I swear. And he said a false shvuah. So it's not considered, doesn't have to bring kapara. He thought that he was saying the right thing. And that's finished. We finished today about Nidre Shgagos and about Shavuos Shgagos. And now we go into the side subject of the Mishnah that spoke about if part of it was mutter, does the whole thing go off or not? Bishamai said whatever is off, whatever is on is on. He says part of it is off, the whole thing is off. So the Gemara starts. That was example of our Mishnah about people eating figs, and he answered them, and then he realized, then he saw some of them, one of them is his father. So Bishamai says the father's mutter, everybody else is asa, but still says everybody's mutter. Tananas, a Mishnah later on, it says on the side, Daf Samach Vav. A Mishnah later on, which is going to be the main subject, I think. That if a person made a neder, and then they can find the Pesach about Shabbos and Yom Tov. What's the case? If somebody asked himself to eat meat, let's say, for instance, or wine, things that people eat on Shabbos, and then he came to him and he said, did you realize that you're not going to be able to eat meat on Shabbos? So he says, I didn't realize. I wouldn't have made the neder if I would have realized that I'm going to become also on Shabbos and Yom Tov also. So that's a Pesach. That's a good Pesach. When you want to be Matan Neder, you go to the Rav. He says, I made a neder on meat. And the Rav says, did you realize that you're not going to be able to eat meat on Shabbos? And he says, no, I didn't realize. I wouldn't have made the neder. That's a good Pesach. But originally they said that whatever is mutter, so Shabbos is going to be mutter, but the rest of the week is asa because the Pesach was only Shabbos. Shabbos I didn't want to make the neder. It's okay, so it doesn't apply to Shabbos, but to the rest of the week it does apply. On Shabbat, Kippur made neder. Kippur came and said no, that it's part of the neder went off, so the whole neder goes off. And this is the case of She'ela, being matir neder, not like our Mishnah. Our Mishnah is not a case of Ataros. Our case is Nidre Shgagos, the case of the figs with the father, that it doesn't even take effect on the father, not because he has to be matir neder. It doesn't take effect. Right. And it's going to be the same so just like in the Mishnah, when you talk about that it didn't take effect because some, he still says doesn't take effect on the rest, the whole thing doesn't. The Kippur says if you had a neder, and they were matir part of it, the whole thing is mutter also. And who argued on Rabbi Kippur? L'chora, those who hold like Beishamai, or the way the Rosh says that the Rabbanan and Rabbi Kippur held, they didn't know the Machlokes Beishamai and Beis Hillel, they didn't know Beis Hillel's matir. Rabbi Kippur says you should know Beis Hillel's matir. So it comes out of Rabbi Kippur is the same as our Mishnah, Beis Hillel, that if the neder is partially off, the whole thing is off. The rest of the sukkah is going to be in this Machlokes now between Rabba and Rava. Rabba is the end of the till the end of the page. Rava starts on the next page. Amar Rabba. Tekul yamak alech adam ilu hayisi yodea sha'aba beinechem hayisi omer kolchem asurin chutz mei abba. The Gemara will talk about what does he say. Very interesting. It could be different pshatim over here. It seems I didn't get clarity in all the different mefarshim here. I didn't get clarity in anything, but it seems there might be a couple of pshatim over here. But the simple words seem to say that it depends. Rabbi says it depends how he retracted over here. First, he said he saw people eating off his fig tree. He said, "You're all asur, kulchem asurim." And now the question is, when he's realized that his father's there, he said, "Oh, if I would have known, I wouldn't have said that." What would you have said? And it depends what he says he would have said. Very interesting. And Rabbi says, if he says different, okay, let's see. If the kul yam, everybody, means he's going to be Rabbi's going to be machmir, and he's going to say sometimes he still also holds that some of the net still remains, even though Beistil is the one who says that since part of it went off, the whole thing goes off. There are sometimes that he also agrees that part of the net still remains. The net on the rest of the people is going to eat the figs. The kul yam, everybody, even Beistil. If I would have known my father's there, if I would have known my father's there, I would have specified that he's mutter. I still would have said kulchem asurim. What did he say? Kulchem asurim, kekorban. If I would have realized my father's there, I would have said kulchem asurim chutz miyabba. So then the kulchem asurim vav mutter. Then Beisil also agrees that everybody still remains asur. He doesn't say on this that the nether goes off completely. Since part of it goes off, everything goes off. But he said kulchem asurim, and he would have said kulchem asurim chutz miyabba. So it still remains kulchem asurim. But lo'nechleku ela ba'omer ilo yisi yodesh abba b'nechem ma'isi omer. If he would have said, I wouldn't have said the whole sentence. The way that he expresses himself, if I would have known my father's there, I wouldn't have said, you're all asur besides my father. I would have said, you and you and you are asur, and my father's mutter. He would not have said at all the word kulchem asurim. Maybe just to highlight that. Did he say kulchem? He said kulchem asurim. If he says, I also would have said kulchem asurim, but I would have said chutz meyava. So then Beisil would agree that the other ones are still asur. If he says, I would have uprooted everything that I said, all the words that I said, I wouldn't have said. That means that's called that it went off, and the whole thing goes off then. If he says, I wouldn't have said b'chal kulchem asurim. I would have said, Ploni and Ploni is asur, and my father is mutter. So then the whole thing is off, because he's regretting the whole word that he said. He never would have said, not a question of regret over here. It's not so much regret. It's not a shayla. It's not a Torah Sadorim. It's saying that it was a mistake. But what was the mistake? I wouldn't have said that word at all. I wouldn't have said kulchem asurim. That's the case that Beis Hillel is lenient. And Rava on the top of the page now is going to be more lenient and say, no, that case, even that case also, Beis Hillel is matir. Even if he would have said kulchem asurim, but I would have said kulchem asurim chutz meyava, that's also a reason that the whole thing goes off. Rava Amar, on the opposite, Beis Shammai also is makel sometimes. He takes the other extreme. The case that you said that I wouldn't have said those words at all, not only Beis Hillel is makel, even Beis Shammai is makel in that case. And Beis Hillel is so makel, is more makel that even if he would have said kulchem asurim, but he would have specified chutz meyava, but that's also a reason why the whole thing goes off. Rava Amar, Rava is the lenient one. The kul yamol kalecha dam ilo isi yodeh shabba b'nechem ma'isi omer ploni asurim b'ava mutter. This case that you said, I wouldn't have said kulchem at all. I would have said ploni. I would have specified who's asur and who's mutter. So then, kulam the Torah. Even Beis Shammai agrees that everybody's mutter because he says I wouldn't have said the whole sentence. When is Beis Shammai machmir? El bomer ilo isi yodeh shabba b'nechem ma'isi omer kulchem asurim chutz meyava. If he says I still would have said kulchem asurim, but I would have said kulchem asurim chutz meyava. I said all of you are asur, and I would have said all of you are asur besides my father. That's the case with Beis Shammai's machmir, and Beisil is makel even in that case. But here the Gemara brings in another issue to explain what they're arguing about. Beis Shammai sabri kirab meir dama tfos lashon bishon, or Beisil sabri kirab yosi dama b'gmar dvar adam nitfas. That's a mistake here. How I highlighted that over there. Take
Is that explaining Rabba and Rabba or only Rabba?
This is explaining only Rabba. Let me just get here a period just to get the loan nitfas. That's the end of the the Gemara, could be the pshat I'm saying is not in the Rishonim, maybe it's just the way I read it, but maybe a pshat. This machlokes Rabbeinu and Rabbi Yossi, if a person says two things, sometimes contradictory, do you listen to the first thing that he said and you don't hear the second thing, or do you hear the whole thing, the whole sentence? Over there, it's talking about that he said Ola and Shlomim. That's the first one. He seemed to say two sentences, and do you listen to the whole sentence? So you just listen to the first thing and you don't listen to the rest. I'm not sure if the pshat I'm saying is true, but I'll try. that the Machlokes B'Shammai B'Hillel is going to be dependent on Rav Meir and Rav Yossi. Rav Meir says you just hear the first thing that he says, and B'Hillel says like Rav Yossi, you hear the whole thing that he says. What's the condition? What's the comparison to this then about first Lashon Rishon, first Lashon Achron? Could be that when a person says, I would have said, he said, all of you are Asa. I would have said, all of you are Asa besides my father. Do we hear that sentence as a unit, or do we hear it as two units? When he says, I would have said, all of you are Asa besides my father, do we hear it as one sentence? If it's one big sentence, it isn't the same as the first sentence. The first time he said, all of you are Asa. None of you can eat the figs. All of you are Asa on the figs. Then he said, later, I would have said, all of you are Asa besides my father. Do we hear that sentence as one unit? And it isn't the same as the first unit. He still says that you hear the whole sentence, but when a person speaks, you hear the whole sentence as was one unit. And therefore, this thing that he says, I would have said, it's different than he would have said originally. If you hold like Rav Meir that you hear each unit separately, first you hear the first part of the sentence, then the second part of the sentence. So he said, I would have said all of you are Asa. He still says, I would have said all of you are Asa. I would have added on something else besides my father. So then the part that he had said is not being retracted. He would have said that. But if you look at the second time that he says, I would have said all of you Asa besides my father as one unit, so he wouldn't have said the first sentence. He wouldn't have said this Kol Chamasurim. He would have said Kol Chamasurim Chutz Miyabba. That's considered two different sentences. That's what Beis Hillel holds. Beishamai says the Kol Chamasurim you would have said, that's the same as before you would have said it. So that you didn't retract. You just added on Chutz Miyabba. That's the reason why Beis Hillel is going to be Mekel, even if you would have said the same part of the sentence and you would have added on. I'm not sure about that lumdus. Maybe yes, maybe not. But just to get at least to get the general machlokus between Rabbah and Rabbah, Rabbah is machmir to say that Beis Hillel, at least let's talk about Beis Hillel. They're arguing both Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. Everyone goes down on that. Rabbah goes down on Nash on each one of them. Rabbah said that Beis Shammai is going to be machmir in both cases, and Rabbah says Beis Shammai himself was mekel in one case. So how does it go? Rabbah says even Beis Hillel was mekel is only mekel in the case where he said he uproots. I wouldn't have said anything that I said before. I said all of you are Asa. I wouldn't have said anything like that. I would have said you and you are Asa and my father's mutter. I wouldn't have said what I said. Then everything is uprooted. But if he says I would have said all of you are Asa, but I would have added on except for my father, then it's not considered uprooting the whole thing. And even Beis Hillel will say that it's Asa. Rabbah takes everything a notch down. He's more mekel, and he says everyone's more mekel. Beis Shammai is more mekel than you think, and Beis Hillel is more mekel than you think. Beis Shammai is also mekel. If he would have said I would have uprooted the whole sentence, then even Beis Shammai holds that the whole thing is uprooted, and Beis Hillel holds even that, even in the case where you said I would have said the same words that I said, but I would have added on more. Before I said all of you are Asa, and I'm saying I would have said, if I would have known, I would have said all of you are Asa besides my father. Also, the whole thing is uprooted, and the Gemara puts it in to Nachlokas Rav Meir and Rav Yossi about Tfos Lashon Rishon or Aflik Ba'ad Baram Adam Nitnas. Adkan, more or less, Machlokes Rabbah and Rabbah. The rest of the Gemara today is going to try to prove who's right and ask kashas from other places. So the Gemara starts now. Eisvei Papa le Rabbah. The kasha against Rabbah. Rabbah is the lenient one. He says that it goes off in any case. That even if he said I would have said the same sentence, I would have said Kulkan, but I would have added on Chutz Miyabba, also everything goes up. Here's the Mishnah later on. Same thing that's Samach Vav. Shitas the Shitas Beis Hillel, right? And Beis Shammai also would be mekel if he would have uprooted the whole thing. If he would have said, I wouldn't have said Kulcham, I would have said Zev Zev. Kesher Papa, Mishnah later on. Kesher Am Rabbi Kiva Ned the Shutim Misasat Kula. The psalm is going in the Mishnah we quoted before. We said in the case of Shabbos and Yontif, he said he's not going to eat meat, and then he was mat there. He says, I would have known if I would have known I'm going to on Shabbos, I wouldn't have said that. So Rabbi Kiva says not only is he mutter to eat meat on Shabbos, he's mutter to eat meat completely. The whole nether is off. Nether should have mixed also with the kula. If some of the nether went off, the whole thing goes off. What's the example? Konem she'eni nena l'kolchem. That's the case. Let's maybe highlight it. I think it'll be better to highlight. Konem she'eni nena l'kolchem. That's one case. Over there it says huter echad mehen huter kulam.
Examiner, is this part of a Mishnah? Are we still in a rice or whatever it is?
Oh, it's a Mishnah. It's a Mishnah later on in the Samach Vav. The same Mishnah that the more quoted, the same Mishnah that the more quoted at the beginning of the sugya a few lines ago in the Amud Beis. that Rabbi Akiva had the case with the meat of the Shabbos. That's Rabbi Akiva. And now it says, case of Rabbi Akiva. What does he say? What does Rabbi Akiva say? So here's a case that he said, but the Mishnah seems to say sometimes mutter, sometimes asar. This is one case. Konam she'eni nenel kulchem. Over there, the halacha is mutter echad mehem, mutter kulam. First, he made an isser on everybody. I'm not going to benefit from anybody. So, and then one of them became mutter echad mehem because of hataras nedarim, whatever there was heter nedarim on one of them, mutter kulam. But if he said she'eni nene, another case, she'eni, maybe we should make a different color for this one. Maybe it'll help us to keep the color code. If he said she'eni nene lo lazev lazev, the take out the word lo, he says specific people, then the halacha is huter rishon hutru kulam, huter achron muter v'kulan asurim. So not clear. The Gemara is going to get clear, I think, but so far we don't understand what is the difference that sometimes everyone's muter and sometimes only some are muter and the rest of them are asur. Just to get the price again. One case it says that konam she'eni nena lekolchem, and it says that if some get, if it partially gets mutter, everybody becomes mutter. In the case where he said something else, eni nena lo lazeh v'lo lazeh, then there are cases where people are still going to be asur. There are cases huter rishon. It says here something within huter rishon huter achron. What does that mean? Huter rishon huter achron seems to mean which person did he make hataras nedarim on? That he would have been, let's say, 5 people, and then it says if he's matter the first one, so then everybody is going to be mutter also, even the 2, 3, 4, and 5. But if huter achron, he was matter number 5, then only number 5 is mutter, but 1, 2, 3, 4 are still asur. The Gemara yet doesn't understand all this difference between who's the first, who's the last, and the Gemara is not going to even discuss it right now. The Gemara at the end is going to say the difference. Why should there be a difference between the first one being mutter, that's going to be matter the rest of them, and the last one becoming mutter, that's not. But it does say something that's for there's a huter kulan. Only in the case of konim sheni nena lekolchem is huter kulan. But there's another case that Rabbi Akiva also is going to agree that not everybody's mutter. Now we're skipping. Don't read all the words so carefully. And in general, you see in the sefer, you see some case over here where everybody's mutter. Only the one that's mutter is mutter, but everybody else is asur. How can we make sense of this Mishnah, at least superficially? That here, what are we finding? That let's take it very superficially. What did Rabbah say? Rabbah before was the machmer and said not every time is Beisil maker. Beisil that said huter mitzvah, huter kula, not always. And sometimes he's going to be a machmer. If he said I would have said the same term, I just would have added on something, then even Beisil holds that it doesn't become completely mutter. Only what was mutter. Mutter was asur asur. But only when he says I wouldn't have said the whole sentence, I would have been okay the whole sentence, like I would have said instead of kulchem, I would have said lazev or lazeh, then I hold that everything is mutter because he's uprooting everything that he would have said. And the Gemara is going to say that according to Rabbah, the Mishnah makes sense, could make sense because there's a case where it's asur, a case where it's mutter. There are some times that you don't say huter kula, but according to Rabbah was the big maker. Rabbah said everything's mutter. That according to Rabbi Akiva, Beisil or Rabbi Akiva, that it's always going to be mutter. No difference if you uprooted it or not. So that's going to more or less be the Gemara's kasha. I can't say I got every single word, but Bishlam of the Rabbah, Mukum la lereisha dama lazev lazeh, the sefer dama lakolchem. The words of the Mishnah that talked about konam sheni nena lakolchem or any nena lazev lazeh would have sounded like how he originally made the neder. We're saying now that according to the Rabbah's difference, it isn't a question of how originally he made the neder, but how he said he would have changed it. What would he have said? So you find a case that Rabbah says that sometimes if he says I would have said something altogether, if I would have said the same thing, just added on something, that's the case where it's not going to say kula. And the Gemara says, okay, so the case of here that says kula asurin, the sefer where it says sometimes you don't say kula, could be according to Rabbah, because Rabbah has such cases, and he can say the Reish is talking about that it's mutter because he says I wouldn't have said the same thing before. I wouldn't have said the same thing at all. I would have changed it completely. in the beginning I said kulchem. What is this? And now I said something else. And Seifa is going to be the Seifa that says that everything is still usher. That he said, I just made a mistake when I said it. That the ratio that says that the whole nether comes off is because he says I wouldn't have said anything that I said before. I would have changed all the words. But the Seifa that says that sometimes it is kula asurin is going to be in the case where he says I would have kept the words that I said, I just would have changed it. But you say in every case, you say in all cases, no matter what you say, Rabbi still holds that everything, the whole nether goes off. You, Rabbi, that's Mekel. So the Reisha says Sutru Kulam is good, but the Sefer says that Kulam Asurim, besides the one that you are matir, what's going to be the case? Which would mean even if you said Lakulchem, even if in all cases you say that it's mutter. Allah. I'm being a little bit loose with the words because I don't know how to say the words. So Ella Seifa, the Amal Zevel Azeh, Rabbi Kivahi, Amai Pligi Rabbanan Allah. I don't know how to say, but I'm a Divya Kol Mutter. The question is, everyone should be mutter. Why should anybody say that it's asa? Why should I don't see the words of Rabbi Kiva and the Rabbanan. Why should anybody hold that it's asa? You say that according to Rabbi Kiva, you even say, again, you say that even Rishama is going to be moder in a case where you uprooted everything, that it should be mutter, even according to Beishama. So more or less, I don't have clarity on all the words. I'm not reading it so exact because I don't have the shot. But the question is that according to Rabbi, every case, the case where you change the words, I wouldn't have said any of those words, then even base Shammai would be mutter, so they shouldn't be dependent on Rabbi Kiva only. Everybody should be mutter in this case. Amalei Rabbi asked back to the one who asked him the kasha, who was Papa, I think. Papa asked him the kasha, or the Rabbi Kiva Meinicha, Seifa B'Mamukam La Damar LaKolchem, Hey Dain Hu Reisha, Hey Dain Hu Achron. The Bryce said the Mishnah talks about in the last case, we were just reading it without paying attention to the word so much, but it did say a case of depends Huta Rishon and Huta Achron, depends who was the one who was mutter. The first one was mutter, the last one was mutter, and according to your case, there shouldn't be a difference who's the first or who's the last. The Gemara does ask it a little different, who's the first and who's the last, because if you said something about Kulchem, then there was no saying about first and last. You just said everybody. So there shouldn't have been any first and last. And the essence of the Gemara should be asking, what's the difference who was first or who was last? In other words, even a stronger kasha, that you're ignoring the middle case. The Mishnah says that there's cases that everyone will be mutter in the Sefer also. In the case of any nana lolazeh, which we're trying to say that kulam asurim, because you kept on to the first language that you said. So then you're forgetting these words. Here it says a case of huta. There's a case of huta kulam over here also. Why are you ignoring these words? You just skip the middle case. You spoke about the first case and the last case. You didn't talk about this case. So you're not explaining it. So the Gemara said, so therefore you must realize that the Mishnah over there is a different subject altogether. Ela reisha dama lakulchem v'sefer kigon shetolan zebazeh v'omar ploni keploni or ploni keploni. They can now be diktani, but they're emtsoi emenu lamatim b'tanu lamala asurin. More or less, the answer of this Mishnah means nothing to do with our subject about being matir part. The rest of it that you weren't matir also goes off or not. This case over here, to talk about any nana lazev lazeh. Very simple case now. The Gemara is going to explain this case, the Sefer, these two last cases, case 2 and 3, very simple. First, he said nothing to do about combining everybody as a group. He didn't say any groups. He asked Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Dan. He asked 5 people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Individually, you're usher, you're usher, you're usher. Each one is individual. Later on, he did have Torah Nedarim. If he's mat, and he was mat to the first one, but he didn't just say you're us or you're us. When he made the history, he didn't just say you. He didn't just say like that. He said first Reuben is us, the first one is us, and then he said Shimon, same as Reuben, and Levi, same as Shimon. And first he asked the number 1, completely us, and then he said 2 should be like 1, 3 should be like 2, 4 should be like 3. So over there, everything the issue of each one is only dependent on the first one that's us. If the first one becomes mutter, then number 2 becomes mutter because he only became usher as number 1. And then if number 2 is mutter, so number 3 is mutter. If he's going to be mutter number 5, So only 5 is mutter because he didn't depend anybody else on him. Each one was a separate neder, nothing to do with asugya. And if everyone's dependent on the first one, if you matter the first one, everybody else becomes mutter automatically. If you matter the last one, only the last one is mutter, everybody else is still usher. So the Gemara got out of the kasha. The Gemara thought that it says over here sometimes Tulam Asurim, which would have been a right to Rabbah, and the Gemara says no, it's a different subject altogether. Kasha number 2, the kasha is going to be here why it says Rabbah, because Rabbah is going to be just as difficult, and maybe Rabbah is even better, and the Rishonim deal with that. But we'll read it and see what we would say and what the Gemara seems to say. Here's the case, another case of our klal, and then something was mutter. Somebody made an isser on onions because onions are not good for the heart. Does anybody know that? Here it says that onions are not good for the heart. So that's why, and he wanted to make sure he doesn't eat onions. He likes onions, so he wanted to make sure he doesn't eat it. So he started making another. I'm answering onions like a korban because onions are not healthy for the heart. Ambulo, maybe for his heart, people that have a weak heart, they shouldn't eat onions. Ambulo, there are some onions, some brand of onions, some types of onions are good. Batzal kufri is good for the heart. So what's the problem? Why did you ask him? Why did you ask him all onions for? So this is a case of Mutter Miktsasa. He wants to be matir the kufri ones. He doesn't even have to be matir it. Maybe the same way we said about that he's under the wrong impression. He thought that every onion is not good. Then he told him no, he made a mistake. The kufri onions are healthy. So the same case as the Mishnah. He was under the wrong impression. He thought that his wife stole and she really didn't. So he said, I'm mastering onions because they're not healthy. We say some of them are healthy. So and the Mishnah says that not only are the kufri onions mutter, all onions are mutter. This is because nether shutta miksasa huta kula. Mamish the same case we're talking about, the same story we're talking about. That since some of the nether goes off because it was a nidrish gogos, so the rest of the nether also goes off. In fact, Ma'asahaya, the Tira Rav Meir, was such a story, and Rav Meir, I think maybe Rav Meir is going to be a point there. It's Rav Meir talking over here. Rav Meir said that everything's mutter. And not only is he mutter in the kufri onions, he's mutter in all onions. My love, the Amar Ilu Ayisi Odeh Shakufri Yafalale Vayisi Omer Kala Batsalam Masun Kufri mutter. In the beginning, he said all onions are awesome. Then he would have said what would he would have said if he would have known? After he finds out that the kufri onions are healthy, what would he have said? And the Gemara thinks he would have said, again, he still would have said the same lashon, kolab solam masum. He wouldn't have changed the whole words. Some words he would have said the same. He just would have added on that kufri should be mutter. I would have said like kusmi kufri. And what does the Gemara want to say? And it says that everything is mutter. So who's the kasha on? This is the case of everything becomes mutter. The problem is that Rabbah should have said that this is Asa. The Gemara makes it a kasha on Rabbah. The Gemara started off, Rabbah. And Rabbah, if anything, seems to be better. Rabbah holds that this case is also mutter. Even if he would have said B'chala B'tzalim, it also would have been mutter. So the kasha seems to be more on Rabbah than it is on Rabbah. The Gemara, it could be an issue about Rav Meir that the Gemara talks about. The Amar Al spoke about Rav Meir might be involved over here because Rav Meir says that Tvos Lashon Rishon. And then it should be that you only hear the beginning. It's not called that it means it must have an Amar Al. The only reason why Rava will say that it's mutter, according to Bisol, because he holds like Rabbi Yossi, that there's, when you say everybody chutz me'abba, that's like you look at it as one sentence, and that's called retracting from the first sentence. But here it says, even according to Rav Meir, it will be mutter. So that may be kasha. Why is a kasha on Rabbah also? But it surely should be a kasha on Rabbah, because Rabbah says that in this case the taka should be yasa. And here it says that the case of kulchem, that kol b'tzalim, except for kufri, is the reason why everything should become mutter. My love, Domar, if I would have known, I would have said everything's us besides kufri. So Moshe says no. Simple answer. That's not the case. Not that he says that I would have still retained my old term of saying all onions are usher except. Then it will be usher taka. The case the Mishnah says that all onions become mutter because he says I would have said a whole different language altogether. I wouldn't have said all onions are usher besides kufri. I would have said this type of onion is usher, this type of onion is usher, this type of onion is mutter, and kufri is mutter. Since over here he's changing his whole terminology that he would have said, that's why Rabbah says that it's mutter. And what would Rabbah say? Rabbah would say that it's mutter according to everybody. Rabbah says it's mutter even according to Beis Shammai. Rab Meir aliba de Rab Akiva, aliba de Rabbanan. Rab Meir can hold like everybody. This, I think that somebody, the Rosh Hashanah, say that this is Rabba talking. Rabba is the one who doesn't want to make it dependent on the Machlokes Rab Meir and Rabbanan of Rab Yossi about Poslosh and Poslosh and Akron. And he says that it could be, this is not dependent on that. Rabba would say that it's dependent on Rab Meir, Rab Meir, because he's the one who says that even if you would have said the Kulchem case, it also would have been mutter according to Rabbi Meir. Only according to, or it would have been us according to Rabbi Meir, would have been mutter according to Rabbi Yossi. But Rabbi doesn't put that whole, doesn't connect it with Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi. But a kid said, what did the Gemara say? The case that says that everything is mutter, the onions, all the onions are mutter, goes back to the Machlokes Rabba and Rabba. Rabba says that it would be mutter only if he says I wouldn't have said the whole terminology, I would have changed everything. Instead of saying all onions are us, I would have said this and this is us, or this and this is mutter. That's the case that everything is mutter. But if he would have said, continued with the same terminology, everything is us besides, then it would have been usher, and Rabba holds that in any case, so it would have been matir. The Gemara brings another kasha, Esvei, Ravina Rava, also attacking Rava. Rav Nassan Omer. Rav Nassan is not like a Bekiva, Rav Nassan is not like a Mishnah. He didn't yet know that everything becomes mutter, and he said, Yesh Nedesh and Miksasa Mutter, Miksasa Asa. He says the opposite. Not that Nedesh Uta Miksasa Takulo. He says that some Nedarim is going to be partially mutter, partially Asa. Ketzad, Nedarim and Al-Kakala, another scenario, similar as we had till now. He said that the whole basket is Asa. The basket of figs seems to be. But then they found out that there were no shuach over there. There were no shuach. They're different. It's a certain kind of a fig that seems to be a good fig. I thought sometimes no shuach I could call them inferior figs. But here it seems to say the no shuach are the good figs. So Omar, either you see a dash, no shuach for sochal, or you see no that if I wouldn't have made it, I wouldn't have made the nether. If I knew that for no shuach, I wouldn't have made the nether. So Rambam came, same case we're talking about, that he was under a false impression, Nidrish Gogos, so the Beno Shuach are going to be mutter. How about the rest of the Kalkola? Kalkola Asura, Beno Shuach Mutaros. This was what Rav Nassan originally said, like where we shown that only what is matir is matir, but whatever not is aser. That you don't say that the Shotem is aser tekulo, Masha Tehuta, Masha aser. But Rabbi Kiva said no. Asher Rabbi Kiva Valimed, now the Shotem is aser tekulo, just like the Beno Shuach are mutter, all the figs are mutter. So very nice. What do we find in this case? We want to know if it's talking about a Kulcham case, right? We said that this case of Kibbutz Matir, is it a case where he said, I wouldn't have said it all what I said, or he says I would have said what I said, but I would have adjusted it a little bit. That was in Machlokes Rabba and Rava. My love, Dama Ilu Yisi Odeh Shebeno Shuach Besocha Hayisi Omer Tenim Shchoros Olabanos Asuros Beno Shuach Mutaros Rabba Kiva Hi Upligi Rabbana. This seems, that doesn't it mean? I don't know why the Gemara thinks so, but doesn't it mean the case that he says I wouldn't have said it all what I said before? I wouldn't have said all figs are us. I would have said the black ones are us, the white ones are us, and you see what? That only Rabbi Kiva is the one who holds that it's mutter, but the Rav Nassan, the Rabbanan, they held that it's a Sabligi Rabbanan, which is Beis Shammai. And you are saying, Rabba, you say that everyone's matir in the case. If you would have changed all the term altogether, I wouldn't have said before what I said, and even the Rabbanan, even Beis Shammai would have held that it's mutter. And here's mashma like that. So the Gemara says, no, it doesn't mean that. Lo, he doesn't say I would have said a whole different terminology. I would have kept the terminology. I would have just said chutz. Lo, ba'omer ilo yisi odea shabano shuach b'socha. I would have known that there these the fancy figs. Hayisi omer kol asura. I still would have said kol asura. I just would have added on chutz b'no shuach b'toros. That's what I would have said. So that's the reason why it's only Rabbi Kiva, not the Rabbanan. So we still seem to hold on to this machlokes Rabba and Rabba. When is Rabbi Kiva make? Rabbi Kiva still when are they mekel, and when is Beis Shammai machmir? One last thing. We didn't do anything. We tried to attack Rabba. We had some attack on Rabba also, but still the Gemara keeps to the machlokes. And one more thing, Mantana Lahadatan Rabbanan. Who's the author of the following brisa? Another Mechamisha Bnei Adam Echad. He made Issa from 5 people together. Hutar le'echad mehem hutru kula. If he's going to be mutter to one of them, for whatever reason, because it was a mistake or because it was matan neder, so then everybody becomes mutter. This sounds like neder shuta mechasasa hutar kula. But in a certain case where he made an exception and one of them is mutter, who mutter bein asurim, then you don't say hutar mechasasa hutar kula. So not clear. What are the 2 cases? The first case is nadam mechamisha ben adam kechad, and then one of them became mutter. And if he says chutz me'echad mehen, then you don't say the hutar mechasasa hutar kula. So it's not so clear. But Rush over here, that's underlined. The Rush over here, the Rush says that for some reason, I don't get it, but the Resha is mashma that it was, he changed it by saying Ploni and Ploni. What is that? That he changed everything. The Resha that everything is mutter is saying that he would have changed the terminology altogether. And the Sefer is mashma that he still would have said Kulchem. The Sefer, not the case I originally said it, but all everything, the Reish and the Sefer are both talking about what he says he would have said. What would he have said if he would have, when he realizes that he wants to be matter somebody? So the Reisha, that's Mekel, is talking about that he said a whole different term. He wouldn't have said those words at all. And the Sefer that says that it's Asa is when he says that everybody that says the same term that he would have said, just how he adjusts it. So who's the author of this brisa? Ila Rabba, Reisha Rabba Kiva B'Sefer Divrei Yaakov. Rabba is the one who's machmir. So he says that the Reisha case is Rabbi Akiva. Again, the Reisha is the cooler case. The Reisha for some reason is mashma that he would have changed all the words. Nadam Michamisha Ben Adam Kechad Putalecha. The case is going to be that he said he changed all the words. He said I wouldn't have said that way at all. So then Rabbi Akiva is the one who's Mekel, and Rabbi Beishama would have been machmir. And the Sefer is Divrei Yaakov because it says that Sefer that everything's asa. Even Rabbi Akiva is going to hold that as asa if he just would have retained the same words that he said and he just would have added on the chutz. And according to Rabbi, who's Mekel, Sefer Rabbanan, the Reish of Divrei Yaakov, the Sefer that says in the case, the Sefer that says that it doesn't go to Mekulo is only Rabbanan. Rabbi Akiva would have matted the Sefer also. And the Reish of Divrei Yaakov, because the case where he would have said a whole different term, then everybody would have held that as mutter. So that's the end. That's as far as I got, and I didn't get it even. Whatever I did get, I also didn't get it so well. But it seems that that's the general machlokas between Rabba and Rabba, as far as that the shutim v'tasut tekula. So again, the main sugya today, the easy sugya we had was nidre shkagos doesn't take effect. If he made a mistake under the wrong impression, he didn't mean to activate the neder, or he activated it by mistake, or he said I'm making an neder because of a certain reason, and that reason is a mistake. All those cases don't take effect. And that's called Nidre Shkagos. Agav the Gemara says that Shvua Shkagos is also what if someone made a Shvua under the wrong impression, also it's Adam B'Shvua, and it doesn't take effect at all. And it's not considered an Aveira. And that's the main sugi of the Mishnah, but the Gemara doesn't talk about that, nothing to talk about. The Gemara does talk about the last case in the Mishnah that talks about that besides the mistake, there was also another part of the Shvua that was not a mistake. Do you say, and Beishamai says no, Beishamai says yes. And not only the case where it's nidre shkagos, any kind of a neder, like a regular hataras nedarim, that you are not a part of the neder. Also, there's going to be a Akiva. They still that say that the whole thing is off. Neder shatim mitzasa. But there's machlokas Rabba and Rava. If Rabbi Akiva is even going to, we'll talk about only the Beis Hillel, Rabbi Akiva, not the Beis Shammai. Let's make it simple because we're not going to pass like Beis Shammai. So we're going in Beis Hillel. That Rabba's machmir and says Beis Hillel is only matir, only takes off the whole neder. If he says, I wouldn't have said those words at all. I would have said altogether different words. Before I said everybody's usher, I wouldn't have said everybody's usher besides somebody. That also, then if you say I would have said everyone's usher, puts me Abba, so then only Abba's mutter, everybody else is still usher. When it says in the Mishnah, that if part of the net that came off, everything came off, that's only say I wouldn't have said those words at all. I wouldn't have said Kol Chamasum. I would have said you and you are usher and you are mutter, and that's the case where we say put the mesasut tekula. If we show the passing like Rabba, you do passing like Rabba, that which is machmir, that even Beis Hillel that says that the shutim mesasut tekula is only when he says I would have said something altogether different. That's the case. I wouldn't have said those words at all. But if he would have said the original words plus chutz, that's not enough to make the whole neder mutter. But they do talk. And one more machlokes we shown him is that I didn't differentiate between the nidre shkagos where the neder in the first place didn't take effect, or when someone's mater neder, and that they say machlokes rishonim, but they say that when someone's mater neder, then in any case when he's mater neder, so then the whole thing comes off. Even though we did, if part of the neder is mutter with hataras nedarim, he's shoyel on part of the neder, and then the whole neder is off.
No, there's that hataras nedarim, the whole neder would come off. But,
right.
As far as the nidre
shkagos, and it wasn't chal, so then. Then you ask him, what would you have said? It means he made a mistake with the part over there with the figs. So then he says, I would have said Kol Chamasurim, that doesn't need have Torah and Torah. That just means that it was a shgaga, a part shgaga. Then everybody would have. That's how the Rishonim seem to talk about. Okay, so something not complete, and don't read the words too closely the way I said it. But if you get a better shot, then read the words better. Yashikach, everybody, we'll be back in about 10 minutes. What? Good crowd, yeah. We'll be back together in a few minutes with Pirkei Avos.